My name is Chao Tayiana Maina, and I'm a digital heritage specialist based in Nairobi, Kenya. My work looks at the intersection of culture and technology, primarily exploring the ways in which African heritage is documented, visualized, preserved, and accessed through digital media. I'm a guest curator for the Antislavery Knowledge Network's virtual exhibition. I think there are many types of visibility. I'll start first by looking at physical visibility, or other sites that we can see, things that are tangible. Now, for me, physical visibility or the tangible sites can also fall into two categories. You have sites that are well known and documented, and others that are hyper-localized, are accessible, and whose history is only known to the communities and to certain families. The case of sites such as Cape Coast Castle, which is highlighted in the City Hearts project, shows the ways in which historical sites can be used to sensitize students, particularly on the transatlantic slave trade, and also looking at the feedback from the students who felt a greater connection to the history and a greater understanding of the history by virtue of being physically situated within the site itself. Now, this is one kind of site that is widely known, and it has sort of a protected status as a historical site. But you also have another category of sites that are more localized and more understood, or rather only understood within either families or communities. And I think I call these sites, sites that are hidden in plain sight. One of the projects that clearly demonstrates this is the Jamestown Hidden Histories project, where you have buildings that have been re-engineered and absorbed into everyday use. So you have sites that were prominent and important sites during the transatlantic slave trade that were either engineered into prisons or have been absorbed into the infrastructure of the local community. So the Jamestown virtual tour does a good job of introducing us to Jamestown as a physical location, but also to the intangible histories that are associated with certain sites and certain places. And I think this, for me, raises a question: how does the community remember historical sites, and what narratives emerge when we link both community memory and landscape? So, for instance, due to the re-engineering of buildings such as James Fort and the removal of the door of no return, some people object to the role that James Fort played in the transatlantic slave trade. Now, here we see a very clear link between alterations in a site and how a site is modified structurally, and how this ends up affecting how a site is remembered or what it is known for. You also have infrastructure that is absorbed into everyday use. And one of the things that I found very interesting about the Jamestown virtual tour was that we see historic tunnels that were used by merchants to transport slaves from one point to another as they were avoiding tax. These sites are situated within everyday life. So in the video, we see, children are playing, people are cleaning and cooking, and life is going on around these sites. So they do not have sort of this designated, protected status that, for example, we will see in Elmina Castle or in Cape Coast Castle. Yet these sites are very crucial to the understanding of the slave trade in the region. And while they are visible in nature, the history around them is not as visible and is not as accessible. So for me, it's very interesting. I find it very interesting to explore this link between what is visible and what is remembered, and asking, how does visibility shape memory? I believe that memorialization is powerful, very powerful in its ability to sensitize and to create awareness. But it is also very important to ask, whose perspective are we memorializing? In this way, understanding the limitations of memorialization as it is affected by our human nature, this being our ability to remember, to forget, to conceal, and to uncover. Now, this is something that is demonstrated in the various AKN projects, where some projects are uncovering things that are not well known, some are sharing things that have been forgotten, and others are highlighting and documenting things that are still remembered. I think the power of memorialization is also greatly tied to the power of knowledge production, looking at the person who controls the narrative, eventually controlling what is remembered and how it is remembered. When we look at the histories of slave trade and colonialism, which are replete with the absence of Africans as human beings, we have millions of people, their pain, their death, their loss, simply being reduced to ledger books in archives, balance sheets, and invoices. So what does it mean to take away the humanity of people and to have it preserved in the archival record? How do we change this, and how do we confront this today? I think that creativity is about expressing and centering the humanity of people who have been dehumanized. And this is creativity in the context of slavery and memorialization of slavery and its legacies. How are we humanizing and centering people whose humanity has been stripped from them? And in this way, how are we refusing the dominant forms of representation of bodies? When people tell their own story, I believe that there is empathy and there's an appreciation of nuances that go untold when the story is othered or told from the perspective of someone else. And this is demonstrated very visibly by the approaches that are used by the various AKN project partners. In the Visualizing Liberté graphic novel, we see intergenerational dialogues. And one of my favorite lines is one in which one of the children, after listening to community elder talk about slavery, says, "This has really given me the idea and the courage to fight in life like our ancestors did to gain their freedom." And this comment and this particular statement stood out to me because I believe that it's very vulnerable. It has a lot of emotion. It's a comment with both promise of the future and a deep sense of awareness of the past. It's relatable. And I think that's what creative approaches do in helping us reimagine other forms of representation and memorialization. If we're using digital media, if we're using online research as a primary form of research, what does it mean when so much information, particularly around community histories and marginalized histories and histories of the oppressed, is not available online? I think there is a lot that the algorithm doesn't see or that is invisible to the algorithm. And this can contribute either to an erasure, an assumption that these histories are either not important or are not going to make their way into narratives and into media and into our understanding of slavery, historical slavery, and contemporary slavery as well. I believe one of the primary advantages of using digital tools is the dissemination and the documentation of perspectives without the traditional gatekeeping. So I believe that digital media in itself has expanded the forms of documentation. It has also expanded the avenues of dissemination and the platforms in which you can share your story and you can share your narrative. The Visualizing Liberté project, which is presented in the form of an interactive documentary, does an excellent job of providing short videos, linking this to text, linking this to landscape. And I believe that this kind of multimedia, multi-modality approach to representing information, particularly intangible heritage, is extremely crucial in providing a greater understanding of past and present.